Good morning to you all, fellow consumers. Good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are. It is a great honor to have you today once again in our series on Humanist TV. And I would like to congratulate Ugandans for attaining independence or celebrating the Independence Day yesterday, 9th October. As a country, after attaining independence, we are 63 years old. And many other countries also are celebrating their independence in respective ways. And yesterday, it was quite an interesting day as we were preparing for today. We were brainstorming and asking ourselves, are consumers independent? As we were brainstorming and preparing for today, we asked ourselves many questions. And that's our topic today. As consumers, we have got a freedom to choose the truth about the consumer's independence. So as we were discussing all these and deliberating on all this, preparing, my colleague Bernard said we have to share our opinions. And we see if we can add value to our stakeholders. So our stakeholders, we are greatly honored to have you today, and we would like to welcome you to yet another of our series. As usual, we thank our colleagues at the Humanist Media Africa for partnering with us and giving us the platform every Friday for an hour to share, to build, to add value to consumer life by sharing our little experiences and using our country, Uganda, as a case study to enable all others what impacts the consumers in Uganda, whether positively or negatively impact consumers elsewhere. It is only the jurisdiction that is different. So I always thank my colleague Bernard for coming in to share his experience, professional knowledge, practicing knowledge, so that as you consumers, wherever you are, you get to understand, you pick up from what we share and we deliberate. So I welcome my colleague Bernard for today. As we deliberate on this topic, we are going to unpack, looking at all levels in its entirety, the way we talk about food and we look at food before farm and after fork. We want to take away the narrative of from farm to fork, because that narrative leaves some of the players out, and it sustains if it isn't changed to look before farm and after fork, garbage in, garbage out. And as consumers, we look how we make the decisions, how we choose, how we act, comes in a very good narrative with garbage in, garbage out. If we take wrong choices, irrespective of having the freedom to choose, we choose wrongly, we are impacted wrongly, and we end up being kind of garbage because of our decisions. which decisions have got responsibilities. So as we set off today, the message that we are giving out to Ugandans might apply to you wherever you are. As we celebrate this Independence Day, let us remember that true independence goes beyond political sovereignty. It means empowering every citizen to make informed, safe, fair choices in the marketplace. Our country, Uganda, is our marketplace. Wherever you are, where you're listening us from, you are in a marketplace. Your country is a marketplace. So you need to make informed, safe, and fair choices in that marketplace that would positively impact your livelihood. That's the topic of today: freedom to choose the truth about the consumer independence. With information, you make informed choice, and those choices have to positively impact on you. As you have the right to basic needs, you have to choose those basic needs so that they are safe to you, they are giving you good health, they enable you to be productive. And as you make those choices, you spend money that you have had earned, and you need to get value of it. You need to make choices on products that are safe for you, products that will not impact your right to a healthy environment. As we always say, consumers, we have the right, also have the responsibilities. As we unpack the ABC to Z of freedom to choose to our independence, we need to look into your responsibilities. As a consumer, you have all of these rights. You have been given information, and you have the rights to everything. But then you have to be critically aware of the decisions you make as you choose, so that you make informed choices. What you are choosing needs to be good for you as a consumer. It needs not to impact the environment. It needs not to impact negatively the other parts of the sphere. But all this comes with a responsible governance, say, that we have in our respective countries. Consumer protection is part of the fundamental requirements for a country to be progressive, making sure consumers' lives who are citizens is safeguarded, it's promoted, and they live a quality of life where they are not a burden to the national economy with disease. With wrong choices as consumers at an individual level, with wrong choices at national level, local government level, household level, these impact consumers as individuals, impact the country, impact the environment we're in. And this is where you could see a number of aspects where standards are brought in to facilitate choice, where products are of quality, products are safe, products have got information like in labeling to enable you, where aspects of environmental principles, sustainability principles, and governance at country, at business, at an individual level comes in. All that put in place, these help us to decide and live sustainably, having sustainable lifestyles that do not impact negatively on our health, on our income, that do not negatively impact on the environment we live in, so that we have got one health, and that one health can be realized when we have got the freedom to choose, but we make the right choices. We make the right choices that are sustainable. We make the right actions, responsible actions, and we are concerned for the rest of the other consumers. All that said, we are going in to unpack, and I would like to welcome my colleague Bernard to lead us through. As Bernard leads us through, all these days we are looking at different aspects. Many of us with modernity, development, and technologies, we have accessed the digital environment. The new era of the digital environment is giving us access to many things. But when we look at the digital finance, many of us consumers, we have got the freedom to choose, but we have chosen, and more of us, we are debt-ridden. We are in debt, borrowing right, left, and center, and that is impacting our quality of life. Tools that have come in to facilitate, we choose to use them, but they are impacting us negatively. So that is where the freedom to choose needs to be looked at with positivity, and through empowerment, we can avert the negativity of the freedom we have, so that we live positively and we're independent. We're not debt-ridden. We're not credit unworthy. We are not malnourished. We are not a plague to the environment. We are not enemies to ourselves. I would like to welcome you once again, and I look forward to our deliberation as I invite my colleague Bernard to start sharing and unpacking further. Nice listening and watching. Bernard, you're most welcome. The floor is yours.
Okay, Henry. Just to be sure that you are able to hear me, so that if you can hear me, that
Yes,
means
we
other
can hear
content.
you.
Okay, thanks. So
We can
first
hear
and
you.
foremost,
And we can see you.
we oh, we want to, of course, congratulate Uganda for the 63rd Independence Day celebration. I think now we have grown. If Uganda was a person, we would start counting down. The retirement would be now. Someone would be 3 years in retirement. So we want to congratulate our country really for the strides actually that we have made in the last 63 years of independence. It's not been easy, but we thank our leaders for taking us through, for ensuring that we have had transitions here and there. We've had a lot of gains, which one of the leaders is saying we need to protect our gains. But also we have had challenges here and there, but we thank the Lord really that we have been pushing. And for the last 63 years, we have moved milestones. So I think we really have to appreciate people, our heroes and our heroines, our leaders, who have taken us through the 63 years of independence. And of course, Mr. Chimera and Bongole, thank you so much for ensuring that I'm also part of this conversation. Of course, usually I am a little bit controversial to some of the issues, but this is my well thought. I'm just going to share with you my well thought understanding of the independence, but particularly for consumers. And I'm just going to give from experiences that we've been living personally as a consumer, but also the consumers that have been interacting with. Looking at our theme today, deliberating on freedom to choice. What are we choosing? Are we in control of what we are choosing as consumers? But also the truth about consumer independence. And I think I'm just going to give my overview and my understanding of this whole thing, but also from my lived experience. Now, to start with, as Uganda, of course, commemorates the national independence, we must be asking ourselves whether the Ugandan consumers, for instance, are truly independent in our dailies, in the way we make choices. Are we actually independent? And especially when it comes to what we procure or what we purchase, when it comes to what we consume in terms of the food we eat, in terms of the air we breathe, in terms of the water we use, in terms of the environment in which we live, in terms of the food environment that is around us. How are we making these choices? Are we independently making choices? Is the issue that I'm going to talk about. So when you look at the last 63 years of Uganda's independence, it has been, I would think that there is political independence because we are able to choose our leaders, our president, our MPs, our district chairpersons. We are able to choose our leaders. That is more or less a political kind of independence. But I need to think that many Ugandans still lack freedom over their consumption choices. We still lack that kind of independence when it comes to the freedom over what we consume, over what we purchase, over what we own. I feel that while we have scored on the political independence, which we celebrated yesterday, but I still think that there's a lack of freedom over the consumption choices that consumers are actually making. And this lack of freedom, it's not because of the colonial kind of the colonialism, but I think it's because of three major things that I'll tailor my conversation on. It is not because of the colonialism, but it's because of the information gap. That is one of the issues that I'm going to spell out. Information gap. That is one issue. Secondly, the market manipulation. And thirdly, the weak regulation. So this will be the center of my conversation. I feel that we still lack freedom due to information gap. Maybe a little bit to break it. When you look at the information gap, do we have adequate information on the food that we are eating, for instance? Do we have information on the ultra processed foods that we are eating every now and then that has been associated with a lot of non communicable diseases, which our people are actually suffering from unknowingly? And many of them will even have to sell their pieces of land to go for treatment abroad so that they can have health back. But what is taking it away? The hidden agenda in the ultra processed foods that our people are actually consuming. Are we having the freedom if we can consume ultra processed foods that are not even labeled, or if they are labeled, the marks or the labels cannot be seen by the consumer, or they are written in languages that the consumers are not able to interpret and make sense of? So already that is lack of independence. We don't have freedom of information on such a thing that each one of us must be aware of the food that you consume. But how many of us can read, for instance, if you open the mineral water bottle and they have put there uh, uh, um, parts per billion, PPPs, ppms? What is that? What does the consumer make sense of that? If you look at the food we are eating, packaged biscuits and whatever, and then they tell you the energy there is 500 kilocalories, how many consumers can be able to interpret that kind of information? So this is where I think that the information gap is something that we need to critically think about for us to be independent. Look at the seed we are planting. How much information do we have about the seed genome that we're actually planting in our gardens? Our farmers are now buying seed from corporate companies, and the seed is not germinating. The external forces have brought on board some policies that are very weird to consumers. That, for instance, you cannot exchange seed between Bernard and Henry. the way we used to do it locally. I bring my maize, you give me your beans, and we exchange our local seed. That independence is not there currently. Corporate companies are taking charge of the seed sector. Are farmers even aware of where this seed is coming from and what are the issues related to the seed? We know that if someone has kind of particular seed from corporate companies, you need to have this seed, and then this seed has to be accompanied with particular chemicals, with particular, hormones to help it grow and whatever. If a farmer doesn't have those accessories that go along with that synthetic seed, then they may not be able to produce. So if someone is independent and yet they don't have freedom to choose even which seed they have to plant, or they don't have freedom to pick this seed from their neighbors as it has always been, so where is the independence? So away from the independence of politics, where is the independence and sovereignty on seed selection for our farmers? So information is a key thing that we need to think about. What about the chemicals? How many of the farmers have access to adequate information on the chemicals, agrochemicals that they are using? Why on earth would our governments, for instance, allow our farmers to use highly hazardous molecules or pesticides in agriculture, which we know already that are carcinogenic, meaning they can cause cancer? We already know that they are mutagenic in nature, meaning that they can alter your DNA. We know very well that they are reproductive toxicants, meaning that they can alter your reproductive system and cause trouble to the reproductive system, affecting fertility issues and menstrual periods of women and whatever. We already know that highly hazardous pesticides have that kind of connotation or attachment. We already know that highly hazardous pesticides are very toxic to bees. We already know that they are fatal when they are inhaled. We already know that they actually are very dangerous to our aquatic life. We already know that highly hazardous pesticides, for instance, are endocrine disruptors, meaning that they can alter your hormonal control. We already know that. But how come that most of those products are on the African market? We have them in the country and people are using them. Where is the independence that we are talking about? Are we having the freedom to actually choose what we want to use? How come that our countries actually are using more of the highly hazardous molecules that cannot be used in the countries of origin? So you see that there is a discrepancy when we talk about independence. If we cannot be independently choosing, or we don't have the freedom to choose which molecules we need to use, we have no determination of what has to be on our market. So where is the independence? I think that is the philosophy that we need to think about every time we are critically thinking about independence. Do we have the freedom on the pesticides or agrochemicals or molecules that we need to use on our farms? Do we? By the way, it goes even beyond the farm because these are hazardous chemicals that can even move in dust. And currently, of course, scientists are finding out that when we have what we call household dust, the dust that we are sweeping in our houses, some of that dust is actually carrying hazardous molecules that have been flying in the air because of the misuse of highly hazardous chemicals that are already flooded in our market. So the information issue, you see that is a broader thing. Do people have freedom to information? Every time we have this information gap, then the independence seems to die away. How do you want the consumer to buy pesticides which are safer if the country, if the leaders have allowed in highly hazardous molecules and they haven't been registered on our registers, unfortunately? So the independence has to be broken down to think beyond the political issues and boundaries or whatever to what information our farmers, our consumers have out there. Let us talk about the information on textile. How much information do you have on the t-shirt or shirt that you're wearing? Most times, these are products that come from abroad, second hand or third hand, whatever they are, and they're the ones we're using because they're the ones we are accessing because we have information that have been approved for use. I mean, so what kind of freedom do we have in terms of selecting the best option that we actually have? What about the products that are on our market? Let us talk about tires, the tires of vehicles, the tires of motorcycles. Which kind of tires are they? How is the safety of those products? Are the consumers having, you know, information, freedom to information on the tires we have for border borders and for vehicles? Do we have that freedom? Are we able to determine which kind of safety tires we need to have in a country? What about the quality of water? Are consumers even aware? Do they have any freedom to complain or to actually submit their issues around water? Which kind of products are we using? In other words, do we have information on all these things, on our vehicles, on the tires, on the chemicals, on the textile we are using, on the food we are eating, etc.? So the information gap, I find that while we have the political dependence, we still have gaps, or we don't have freedom to this information. Mind you, even the information that we have on our television, some of it is actually false information, unfortunately. I think I'll speak about it a little bit later when I come to that advertising issue. But that is the information gap alone. So think about a consumer. Do we have the freedom to information? And is the information we are receiving actually authentic information that we need to have? Remember, information is one of the rights that a consumer has. But which kind of information are we having? So that is one angle that we can look at the independence that we are talking about. But also we may need to reflect on the market manipulation. In Uganda, we know very well that over 40%, for instance, of chemicals we have in the country are fake. Now, if we have molecules that are fake on the market and we have all these regulations in place, how independent are we? Talk about adulterations. We have a lot of adulterated food on the market, and our leaders are aware. The Constitution speaks about adulteration. We have a lot of standards on adulteration. We have a lot of regulations that can support in this. We have the Public Health Act. But under what circumstances do we have adulterated products on our market? Of course, we don't have information on these adulterants, first of all. And so the consumers keep taking, adulterated products and safe products on the market, etc. Use an example of phones. Most of our cell phones are actually fake. But are consumers even aware of how to detect a fake phone? Are we even aware how to detect counterfeit in our phones, in our gadgets, in whatever we are using? Do we have this information with the consumers? Or our consumers have been blinded. Whenever they see a cell phone, as long as it's cheap, they will buy. But how safe is this phone? What is the impact of this cell phone on the human health, on people's health? Do we ever think about that as part of independence? If we cannot have independence as a country to allow in only safer products for our people, that means we are not independent at all. Because if you cannot control the safety of the products that are coming within the country, besides they're not being manufactured in the country, they are coming out from somewhere else. So I mean, it's just crazy that we need to think about independence beyond the politics. We need to think about it in terms of the market, where we are selling our food, our products, our phones, our gadgets, etc. What about now the other third element around regulation? We have so many laws in place. We have so many standards. We have so many, policies and etc. But are they being executed? Are we showing independence in implementing those laws? By the way, are those laws actually in the interests of the consumers of Uganda or Africa? Or we are at the mercy of those colleagues who came first of all, who are explorers, who came to colonize us and whatever? Are our laws in conformity with the local context? Are they addressing the realities of the consumer in the Uganda we are talking about, or in Africa? Are we having laws and policies that speak to the consumer? First of all, there are certain things which are very interesting. That Uganda as a country, we have taken so many years pushing for a consumer law. Why do we even take so many years to have a consumer protection bill? For instance, why? When everybody is actually a consumer. Why on earth would our leaders fail to pass, for instance, a consumer protection bill or law? Why? Now, I know that we have a competition act, fine, but how is it being executed? Are Ugandans favorably competing in the marketplace? We need to think about it. If you look at ultra processed foods, how are they being regulated? Who is regulating them? If we talk about advertisement of unhealthy food products, where is the regulation? How do we know what is protecting the consumers against the highly processed foods that are very high in sugar, that are very high in fat, that are very high in sodium? I mean, where is the regulation? Or if they're in place, how are they being executed? We have many standards, but are consumers even aware of the standards? We have a lot of laws and policies. We have the constitution, but is the consumer actually even aware of the provisions of the constitution? For the last many years, since 1995, we have a provision in the constitution, I think, where we're supposed to translate the constitution in other languages. But I want to guarantee you that in the last 30 years, the country has failed to get money to translate the constitution into the mother languages that people can understand. We know that the illiteracy levels are still higher in some communities. How many people have access to the constitution? How many of us understand the constitution itself? How many of us even understand the laws and policies and regulations and standards that we have in the country? Isn't this part of being colonized? Is it anywhere to do with independence? Are we even independent that we cannot even have our own law in our languages? So you see that we have a lot of things to think about. So therefore, true independence means also economic and information empowerment. If we want to say that we have true independence, then we must mean that there is economic independence, there's also information independence. Knowing what is our food, what is in our food, understanding our rights, and being able to make healthier and fair choices as consumers. So that is one issue that I can comprehensively look at when it comes to the freedom. But also we can talk about what I called here the illusion of choice. The illusion of choice in the Ugandan marketplace. There's a lot of illusions when it comes to our marketplace. Maybe we think we are choosing freely, but of course, many of our choices are being determined by someone else who is not actually us. I want to give you quick examples. If you look at the supermarkets in Uganda, what do we find in the supermarkets? If you look at our shops, what do we find in our shops? You will find actually that our supermarkets, our shops are dominated with, for instance, foods that are imported that are very high in sugar, salt, and fat, which are actually risk factors to non communicable diseases, which all of us know and our leaders know. If you go to the supermarkets, you will find that actually they are highly endowed with imports, which are high in sugar, which are high in fat, which are high in salt, and by the way, excluding our local and indigenous healthier food options. If you go to our markets, supermarkets, it's very difficult that you'll find indigenous healthier food options, but rather you'll find imported unhealthy ultra processed foods. That is common knowledge. Every time you move to our supermarkets, that's what you're going to see. And then they come well packaged, with cartoons, to attract us to eat them, to attract our children towards them. And at the end of the day, we lose our tradition, our culture, our food is actually eroded from our own supermarkets. Is that freedom? Is that independence? And mind you, there are even some products you'll find and they are called for export only. And then you ask yourself, okay, so why why do we have products that are meant for Africa only and are not meant for whoever is making them? And we are here busy talking about independence. How? Where is the freedom? So you'll find that our choices are being determined probably by someone else. Can you imagine that the products that we are using in agriculture, crop protection products, agrochemicals, they are also being predetermined by somebody else somewhere. That these can go to Africa, but they cannot be used in Europe. We are talking about over 60% of the products that are being used in agriculture. We talk about agrochemicals. They cannot be used in the countries of origin. So they can only be exported to Africa by those companies. I mean, when did we reach this level? That this particular product can only be for Africa. And so it is sent to Africa and cannot be used in Europe. So when you're in Europe, they tell you for export only. This cannot be used in our country. So why do we have products that cannot be used by the manufacturer, but they can only be used externally and in Africa and Asia? Why? The independence is not there. I feel that there is a lot of illusion of choice in the Ugandan market. I also want you to think about other things like the advertisements that are happening. Can you imagine in our own country that is independent, a corporate company comes up with their soda and they advertise it on our television any time of the day, and they tell you that when you drink this soda or this energy drink, you're going to fly? Can you imagine that kind of thing? First of all, it is not indigenously made. Secondly, it is being advertised in our country. Thirdly, it is high in sugar. It is high in nutrients or ingredients of critical concern that have been related with non-communicable diseases, and is being advertised on a national television during daytime when our children are watching TV, and they're telling us that when you drink this product, you're going to fly. Why on earth would you have that kind of advert? So where is the independence that we are talking about? That even our media cannot have the independence to choose what has to run on our media pages or our media platforms. Why on earth would someone do that, for instance? Someone tells you that when you get this margarine or whatever product, this fat, smear it on your bread and your baby in 2 days will put on height. I mean, why on earth would even our leaders who claim to be leading independent consumers allow such an advert on TV? So you see, we are living in illusions, just living in illusions. If you look at the way sugary products are being marketed to children in schools, in on TV, on social media, and etc. Where is the independence? This is luring the consumer to buy them. Yesterday on the X Space, I was telling you why ultra processed foods have particular characteristics like they're high in sugar, fat, and salt, so that they are tasty and so they can deal with your, feedback mechanism of the body, and so it can lure the body to actually take more and more and more. And some of these products actually even have caffeine, which is an addictive, so that the consumers can get more addicted. Why on earth would you force a consumer to take a caffeine or a caffeinated kind of drink? Who is making for us choices? There is a lot to think about. And then consumers have talked about the labeling. Products are not labeled. People cannot even know which product is healthier, which one is not. So who is taking charge of us? Who is controlling what we are eating? Who is controlling our choices? There is something wrong somewhere. The other issue is about the economic constraints. Most of the consumers, you're talking about between 30 and 40% of Ugandans actually are living below the poverty line. That one is known, just below the poverty line. And of course, also the poverty line has been defined by those other comrades. But the freedom to choose does not exist when consumers can only afford what is cheap. There is this kind of thinking that, freedom, but the freedom to choose shouldn't actually exist when consumers can only afford what is cheap, but not what is healthy. People end up choosing what is cheap as compared to what is healthy. Now, if you look at the fast foods, they seem to be cheaper, and so consumers will run to buy them, but not healthier for them. Check the cheap phones. You go to town and you can only find cheap phones, but cheap meaning they can easily get them, but actually when you go backward, they are counterfeit, they are fake, they are not supposed to be anywhere in the marketplace. So freedom to choose does not exist when consumers can only afford what is cheap and not what is healthy. So we need to think about agrochemicals, the food, the cheaper phones, the cheaper clothing, the cheaper spare parts, the cheaper drinks on the market, etc. So we need to think about independence of our people in terms of economic, so that they can be able to afford what is healthy. Consumer independence requires economic justice. It requires fair incomes for our people. It requires fair prices for our products. It also requires access to affordable but safe and nutritious food. If we cannot have these, then we are just living in illusions. The other issue is about information as power, the right to know. The right to know. Consumers are not free when they do not have access to truth. We cannot think that consumers are free if we cannot have access to truth. The adverts are wrong. The adverts are misleading. The labeling we have on our products are misleading. That's why you go to the market and you find something, they tell you it is 1 kilogram, but when you measure it, it's actually 900 grams. So consumers are not free. They are not independent until they have access to truth. So is what we are sending out there true? Is it right? Is it correct? Are we giving people right information? If you're selling us phones, are they the right phones? Are they true gadgets? If you're selling people headsets, are they the true headsets? Are they correct? Are they safe? If you're packaging us food, the other day I was reading a report from Public Eye, and they indicated that actually the milk that we are giving to our children, the one we are buying in the supermarkets and we are giving to our children as, instant milk and whatever, Most of these complementary feeds for children have more sugar and fat as compared to the same product in Europe or US. So you ask yourself, so what went wrong? What's wrong with us that we cannot have the same product as the children the other side? So the information bit of it as power, information as power, the right to know. Our consumers are not free until when we are able to give them access to truth. If we can't have access to truth, then we are not anywhere. We are not independent. Every time people are eating unhealthy food because of the hidden agenda, then we are not anywhere to independence. So we need to make sure that consumers have clear access to labels, labels that are clear, labels that are right, labels that are talking truth. We have seen so many claims. This cures cancer, this cures mania what, this one cures this one healthy for your bones. But actually, when you check, nothing. So, can we enable our consumers to have clear information on the products that actually they are purchasing? Can we ensure that the consumers are able to be educated? So, lack of this clear labeling and consumer education will keep our people dependent and misled. So, can we work out a mechanism of how consumers remain educated, they keep independent, and then they can be able to uh, get true information? If you look at nutrition information on the products we are having, nutrition information, expiry dates, original, like the food origin of the food, where it is coming from, all of these labels, most of them are very unclear on the packaging materials that we have. Some of them are in Chinese, some of them are in Indian, some of them are in even French. How do you expect a consumer in our country, Uganda, which is independent, to read Chinese? I mean, we need to reason out some things, and then you see that they have been allowed on the market, and our leaders probably are not concerned because maybe, they have been bribed or something like that. We need to do a lot of consumer advocacy, consumer engagement, and etc. But consumer independence also starts with transparency. We have to be transparent in the way we are dealing with consumer products, because consumers, if they lack the transparency in terms of information, then we are misleading our people, then we are going to end up in trouble. In fact, we're just eroding the independence that we talk about. As I come towards the end, let me also speak about consumer rights and protection frameworks. Are consumers being protected by the law? Do we have regulations that are actually protecting the consumers, or we have them in books but they are not being executed? So also, independence means having systems that protect, not exploit consumers. Now we need to reflect whether our systems are protecting consumers or whether our systems are actually exploiting consumers. So we need to think about, every time we talk about consumer rights and protection frameworks, we need to think about whether our consumers are independently being protected and not being exploited. But when you look at the explanation I've given above, you realize that most of the laws or regulations, or the failure to execute them, is actually tending towards the exploitation of consumers as compared to protecting the consumers. So if you look at the Competition Act, you look at the Consumer Protection Law, you look at all these standards, the regulation, are they exploiting or they are protecting? If they are supposed to be protecting, are they being executed to actually protect the consumers? Are they being enforced? Are they being implemented? We need to think about it. And then we need to also think about corporate power and globalization. Our markets may be politically free, but are actually economically dominated by multinational corporations. Now, these multinationals, they tend to shape our Ugandan food. They are shaping our decisions. They are shaping our product landscape. They are shaping everything, including even education that we are undertaking. So, multinationals shape our food, and yet we are independent. How? How should that even happen in the first place? How should multinationals even form our landscape? If they make decisions on the product landscape of our country, and yet we are independent. how does that even happen? Actually, they even shape what is supposed to be sold and what is supposed to be advertised and what is supposed to be consumed. How would an independent state, for instance, have such kind of parameters? I find it illusion. I just find it illusion. So many products that we have, first of all, are formulated differently from what is formulated for Europe, for what is formulated for the US, what is formulated for other countries. Most of our products that come from the same countries could be high in fat, sugar, salt, caffeine, and even carbonated. All of those illusions that we need to think about when you're talking about corporate companies. They decide how to pollute our air. They decide how to bring plastics to actually go into our landfills, and all these things are predetermined by corporate, the corporate power of globalization, which is something that we need to deal with. Often, of course, challenging us that our products our indigenous products are demonic. They are bad, they are poor, they are for the poor people, and whatever. All sorts of narrations. And I think we need to do something to ensure that people are actually independent, not the dependence of politics only, but to extend a little bit into that. So consumer independence can also mean challenging unfair trade, challenging unfair marketing or practices that actually exploit us, but also challenging the weaker regulatory systems in our country. Now, as I conclude now, I want to give some bit of way forward. I think that we need to build true consumer independence. One, we may need to empower consumers more often through education, through awareness, through access to information. If our consumers are empowered, our consumers are aware, our consumers have the ability to make choices, I think we can be able to contribute to their independence. I also think that we need to promote local production. Why can't we think about local production, diversified food, healthier environments which are locally rooted, having healthier and affordable options in our countries? Also, we may think about strengthening our regulations. The regulations exist, but can we strengthen enforcement? Can we be more tough and stringent to make sure that we cover all these notes? And then issues of mandatory labeling. We need to label our food products. Can we have regulations that are not in place, like the nutrient profiling model, for instance, to secure our food system, to secure the food that we're actually giving to our people? The nutrient profiling model can actually give us the thresholds for sugar, for salt, and fat. That could lead to reformulation of food products that we are actually dealing with. Can we have front of pack warning labels? Can we have regulations on restriction of marketing of unhealthy food products to our children? All those could support to make our consumers more independent. Could we mobilize consumer voices? Now, Consent and other consumer protection organizations, can we mobilize consumers, engage them so that they can have a bigger voice to challenge the status quo of our dependence? And maybe can we also encourage responsible businesses? Can we reach out to the businessmen and women and ensure that they have responsible and fair businesses in terms of transparency, in terms of profit margins, etc. Now, freedom isn't just political. It is also what is on our plate, what is in our houses, what we are engaging with. Independence without informed choice is actually illusion. Independence without informed choice is just an illusion. But also, a free consumer is an informed consumer. If a consumer is not informed, they are not yet independent. So, independence is about consumer information. So a free consumer is an informed consumer. And lastly, we need to decolonize everything. We need to decolonize our diets. We need to decolonize the way we do things. We need to decolonize our projects. We need to decolonize our schools, our education system, our laws, our regulations, and then we reclaim our choices back. So thank you so much, Henry. Again, so sorry again for taking a very long kind of time. But sometimes when I'm talking about consumer issues, I get disturbed and I want to. But anyway, for now, I think that could be a little bit of the sharing that I can give now, unless you want me to share on something else. But for now, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bernard. You don't need to apologize. When you are making consumers, empowering consumers to be responsible to assert their rights, there is not too much talking, but there is more assertiveness and more empowerment so that we get a sustainable world. With that all said, Bernard, that is great, bringing out issues from the socio-economic perspective, environmental, bringing in technology, bringing in policy, bringing in issues of ethics. That has been a wide span, and it really grounds the aspect freedom to choose. But what are you choosing? Like a saying, always think beyond the bottle of milk that you're seeing in front of you. Think beyond the bottle of water. Think beyond the plate. As somebody who has prepared that food, what is their well-being? I've just like that. The freedom to choose should not only be mind fixed on the product that you're having, on the service that you're having, but behind that product and service, there are many attributes. Like I was saying earlier, the narrative of from farm to fork needs to change and say before farm and after fork, because a lot comes in before you plant the seed, you put fertilizer. What is the quality of the inputs? And after consuming, wasn't there food poisoning? Wasn't the food, the product, leading to non-communicable diseases? Wasn't it cancerous? Because that is after the fork. So the narrative that you have shared is quite rich, and it really brings out the aspect. If you are buying a device and it is not of quality, like Uganda has just launched what we call SIM Clear, where you can check the quality, the authenticity of your phone. Is it a genuine phone before you pay for it? And if you enter the number, the serial number of the phone onto the app, then you'll get to know that this is a genuine phone. I'm getting value for money. These are some of the steps that are very key. So the Uganda Communications Commission here in Uganda has just launched a few days on the 8th of October, a homegrown app platform where consumers can log in the serial number and you get to know whether your phone is fake or it is original, it is a good type, and it's of quality. These are initiatives now we need to put out more to the consumers to be informed and make right choices, to fight fraud, counterfeit, the greenwashing. And when you look at all this, as Bernard you've shared, this will give the consumer value for money. They will be in position to save money and do independent choices, freedom key, and I would like to appreciate that. But for us, the consumers, just imagine you have the freedom to choose and you have got the information. You are independent making those choices. But let's take the kind of food we eat. Unfortunately, you prepare a delicious meal, but you waste the food. You're a farmer, you're losing the food. That is not independency. Then you are there in that as a consumer, you continuously do the negative consumerism. You acquire a lots of things, but and all those things you cannot recycle them, you cannot reuse them, you cannot repurpose them, you can't reduce on your big appetite of choice, you can't redesign, you can't recycle. You are not independent. You need to be independent, that you think about the environment you live in, you think about the social impact by reducing on unfair consumption, by reducing on the waste, by recycling, reusing, repurposing, redesigning. This will give you that freedom that we are speaking about, of your mind, of your resources. And I would like to, as we roll to the conclusion, come in and look at issues that we work out, work on the issues of safety. But if you are a consumer who is responsible and you are accessing safe food, you access this safe food, unfortunately, you abuse it. How do you abuse it? By wasting it, losing it. That shows that you are not an independent consumer. You are still not a responsible consumer. As we advocate for consumer independence, we also need to make sure we are inclusive in decisions that are being taken in the food systems, in the energy sector, in the transport sector, in the digital economy. We need to be inclusive as consumers and give our voices. That will bring our independence. Speaking about safety, protecting the economic interests of consumers, that would lead, and this is where Bernard has been raising these issues, the economic independence of the consumer will come in with inclusivity, will come in with information. Like Arya said, and people who are borrowing left, right, and center, and they are in a debt burden. But still, with consumer information and inclusivity, consumers were able to sue certain apps that were the owners of the apps that were lending them money and abusing their privacy. And the glorying has the fellows that were abusing the consumers got charged. But all this came out because consumer information was there. Consumers were educated on how to approach some of these challenges. The redress comes in. This all comes in with consumer representation. To be independent as a consumer, you have to have the traits of sustainability. If we are not sustainable, looking at issues socially, how do they impact? Economically, if I make a wrong choice, how does it impact me economically? How are my choices affecting the environment we are living in? Then, if we do not think about that, then we are not part of the sustainability. We need to kind of be alert, aware, and in the digital economy we are in today, we have got rights and responsibilities. To be a free consumer and having a freedom to choose, we must brace ourselves with knowledge with regards to the digital economy. Most of us were doing e-commerce. We need to get to know how we use those gadgets, how we behave when we're online, and we need to get to know we have got those right to privacy. How do we give out our data and how do we protect it? I would like to wind up by saying and sharing out some of the sins against humanity which are consumers and which impede our freedom. Sin number one, having governance and politics without principles affects us consumers. We need to speak up on good governance, the politics, and have principles in it. Two, wealth without work affects consumers. Just imagine somebody who has wealth, opens up business. You go in to complain and would say, is it you who made business for me? Then if you can't listen to your market, who are consumers, then that is ill wealth. So wealth without work affects consumers. Enjoyment without conscience. You have got that freedom to choose as a consumer, to enjoy what you have chosen. But if you don't have the conscience, it makes you an irresponsible consumer who is not independent, but dependent on wrong decision. Knowledge without character. This affects consumers. If you have got a wrong character, you are not principled. Even if you have got knowledge, then you will be affecting the consumers because you'll be doing wrong decisions. Business without morality affects consumers. Consumers end up being affected where businesses do not have morality. They do not have ethics. This is where you find counterfeit, you find alteration, you find fraud, the unscrupulousness, the scams. So we should have business with morality, ethics, science without humanity. Bernard, you've talked of the highly hazardous pesticides, where they are not used where they are produced, but they are exported. Exporting a science in the name of protecting, but it has no humanity. It is immoral. It affects the consumers. Consumer health, we are humans. We need to be healthy and enjoy responsibly the planet we have. Religion without compassion. You have freedom to choose the religion you are in, but when you have no compassion, when you have no social concern for others, then it makes you inhuman. And this comes also to us as consumers. Rights without responsibility leads to unsustainability and irresponsible consumers, where we consume irresponsibly. So when we have got rights as consumers, we have got the freedom to choose, but we have got a responsibility to be critically aware and take correct action choices that are sustainable. As consumers, when we have the freedom to choose, that means we have got the power. Like the governments have got the power. As consumers, if we have got that freedom to choose, we have got the power, but we need to be accountable. Like power without accountability results in unsustainable local, regional, national, and international decisions, where we are not in position to walk the talk. Where Bernard talked of investing in implementing policies, laws, standards, regulations, we need to enforce them. That will be power with accountability. But power without accountability leads to impediment. Another one is development without sustainability is not development. As consumers, we aspire to develop with our freedom to choose. You choose the land you want, you choose the car you want to drive, you choose the food you want to eat. But if you will not develop, if the food continuously takes you to the hospital, leads you to hospital, leads you with a healthy burden. So development without sustainability leads to unsustainable development. And lastly, there are consumer laws Bernard talked about and the constitution of the country, and all those of you who are listening to us, in your countries you have got laws. But the sin against humanity, a sin against consumers, laws without justice lead to unsustainable communities, do not enable partnerships, do not enable get realize aspirations. So we should have the laws with justice, consumer protection laws with justice. They need to be implemented, standards that assure us of quality, safe, healthy products, goods and services need to be implemented. Those are laws with justice. When the consumer is affected, there is redress. So the scene, last scene 11, talks about laws without justice lead us into unsustainability. They do not facilitate innovation. They do not facilitate freedom. They do not facilitate inclusivity. They do not facilitate humanity growth and sustainability. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we were tackling today, we have tackled quite a lot, and we have unpacked a lot. We've gone through the social, economic, environmental, issues to do with policy, issues to do with legal issues, technologies, issues to do with ethics. And I would like to thank Bernard, my colleague, and also thank Dennis for always coming in and producing our show, quickly picking up all the materials that we have generated and linking them to the subject matter. We would like to thank you and your colleagues at the Humanist Media Africa and the respective producers of the Humanist TV Africa. We would like to thank you very much. And colleagues, I would like to wish you a good weekend. Freedom to choose requires responsibilities. Get to know the truth of your consumer independence by looking into asserting your rights, but also upholding your responsibilities. Be critically aware. I wish you a superb weekend, and thank you very much for the time, and my colleague Bernard for always unpacking and bringing in the eagle's eyes view on all of these issues. As the eagle flies high, it sees on a wider scope. And Bernard, I thank you for the wider scope that you always bring into our narrative of consumer safety, of the consumer protection and better business agenda that we are driving at Consent. And we would love to make sure that it continuously builds on your well-being, leads to quality of your life, leads to sustainability and growth wherever you are. God bless you and a superb weekend.